Okay, we're recording.
What are you trying to do? Crashed off the pole.
We've got liability insurance for that. We've got liability insurance for that. Yeah.
Just as well the pole was it.
Okay, good morning, folks. Welcome to Armchair Travel. This is all very new. Trish is getting technical. We're streaming live. Is that it? Are we, Trish?
Yes, we're live on YouTube.
Well, there you go.
We're recording.
We're multi-megastars. Isn't that wonderful? Ronda and I are happy this morning to share one of our travels with you.
Lollipop.
Have it pointed this way.
Some years ago, we were fortunate enough to go to Alaska. Probably one of the nicest trips, the most exciting trips we ever did. We were going to do what everyone else does and up on one of those big ships. But we went into Hello World and investigated. It was pretty expensive. And they also wanted half down 6 months before we left. So we were pondering, we weren't sure. And then a friend of ours, Graham Sargent, who some of you may know, he had been to Alaska with his wife, Lynn, and had met a travel agent over there called Sandy Rollins, who was involved with the adventure ferries. And it turned out that Sandy Rollins could organise this trip for us, and it didn't cost nearly as much, which suited us, of course, but it meant we did most of it ourselves. There was no escort. We had to get ourselves in between places. So back here in Horsham, we spoke to Chris, wasn't that time, Chris Wall? And he was good enough to organise our flights to and from the States, and also hire a car in Alaska. So basically what we did was drive around Alaska. Now, in preparation for the trip, we were going to Alaska, so we thought, it's going to be bloody cold, a bit like Horsham this morning. So we bought Long Johns, went off to Kathmandu and bought our Long Johns and all of those things for the cold weather. And by the time we got to Alaska, I was buying shorts and t-shirts. It was very, very different.
Well, we can probably start now.
Yeah, well, we start our trip.
Well, we flew to Los Angeles. Sorry. Yeah, we flew to Los Angeles and then we flew across to Las Vegas and then we went up to Bellingham, which is in Washington State, and it's about 60 miles from Vancouver. And we'd been to Bellingham before because in 1987 and 88 my brother was at the West Washington University and we had been to Bellingham. So we got there and the day after was July the 4th, which was interesting. Yeah, it's pretty much like Australia Day is here, isn't it? You know, people, you know, having barbecues and things.
Well, as a self-disclosure, I'm an American. I'm also Australian. So 4th of July was a pretty special time for me. We'll talk maybe a bit more about that later when we get to Washington, DC. But
You can have a look at his expired passport.
yes, we were going to go to see Rhonda's brother, and so got our Australian passports and sent in to get the ESTA to go into the States, and Ronda got hers, and they said, you can't have one, you're a citizen. So I had to either renounce my American citizenship or get an American passport. Renouncing costs quite a lot more money than getting a passport. So I'm still guilty of being an American citizen. And of course, whenever we went around the States, it was quite easy for me, but a bit difficult for the foreigner. I had to wait customs. I had to wait. I just went through, you know. You never know with these shifty Australians. So.
All right, we'll turn the light off. And
Okay. Now on to the trip. It's warm here now.
I'll just shut.
Everybody warming up? Yeah.
Okay, so that's Bellingham. It's just it's a university town, I suppose. Yeah, and we can press on. Just sort of sites around Bellingham.
Whereabouts are we in Bellingham there?
Oh, I don't know. There's going to be a bit of that, Trish, because it was a while ago.
And that's near the water in Bellingham.
Yeah. Okay, so then on July the 5th we got on the ferry, which is, you know, you think of a ferry as something that goes from, you know, Port Arlington to Sorrento, but it was big. And Sandy, we were on that boat for 2 days, and Sandy booked us a twin cabin. So there were 2 bunks, there was a bunk and a bunk, so, you know, we had plenty of room for our baggage.
Excuse me, inaccurate information. We had a cabin for 4.
Oh, yes, yeah,
Had bunk beds on either side
yeah.
because Sandy decided that the smaller cabin with luggage was just a bit tight for us.
And it had its own, you know, bathroom and shower and so on, and then there were cafes and restaurants on there, and they had the lower deck, all these big motorhomes and vehicles went on, and there are obviously dogs in the dogs and cats, I suppose, in the motorhomes, and twice a day people could go down to the car deck and get their dogs out, and it been a bit messy, I'd say, but and yeah, so it was very nice accommodation, and on the top deck there were people in those little tents that they'd set up, so it's quite an operation. It's called the Marine Highway Ferries, and so then we're off. These are just things seen from the boat or the ferry as we're going along. And then that's a British Columbia ferry going in the opposite direction. Taste of the mountains to come. I've still got that windshield. Okay, now we'll stop now because this was the first place we stopped, called Ketchikan.
Being in the ferry we parked well out of Ketchikan because the main things were for the big ships. And so we had a fair walk into Ketchikan itself. As you can see, it's built on almost on the side of a mountain. I wouldn't recommend it when you got a bit older, but yeah, Trish. This is quite a well-known tunnel in Ketchikan through the mountains. Again, the height, you can see the height of the houses. Yep, Chris. Yeah. It was a tunnel. Took a bit of working out there, we saw the sign. It's a historic tunnel.
So can people walk on the red side?
Yeah, you walk through there, yes. That's one of the cruise ships. We were talking to one of the people from the cruise ship, and they were saying that they cruise during the night and then sightsee during the day. So they seem to. Yeah. This was on the outside of the house. If you want to live here and not visiting someone who does, stay out. If you're drunk and loitering, police will be called. There are little kids that live here. They don't need to see your drunkenness. Thanks. P.S. Quit fucking pissing on our steps. We had to take a photo of that. It's and again, this is still Ketchikan. I don't know who that is.
They had flights, going in and out, little flights, and lots of touristy shops, and it was really junky stuff. Whereas further into Alaska, a lot of the things that for sale were genuine items, and they had a little symbol on them that told you it was made in Alaska. But this Ketchikan, we didn't like it much at all. It was really just for these big cruise ships. Yeah.
Just go back one. That's okay. Doesn't look like much, but the accommodation and the food was good in the restaurants. Yeah.
No tipping. You were not allowed to tip because they said the people got paid a certain wage and there was no tipping.
Which was fairly interesting because a lot of Australians complained that in the United States you're expected to tip, and it's added on. So to be over there and not tip was different. Okay, this is again just on the boat.
This is it. The first stop was
Sorry,
Wrangell.
we're off the boat.
The first stop place was called Wrangell, which is W-R-A-N. Yep. And that was we stayed at a B&B, Leslie's B&B, and that was the view from sort of out of her lounge room window.
Oh, that's right.
And that's inside her lounge room. They had sort of things displayed. They hunted, and she had some nice breakfasts. Yeah. And she had this little thing outside the window, and the hummingbirds would come, and that was pretty spectacular. Yeah. Okay, so out from Wrangell, we did a couple of trips. And this first one was to this area where the bears were fishing, And so it was about a half-hour boat ride.
There were only 30 people on this little tour, so it's just quite unique in that way. And as Rhonda said, about 30 minutes in a boat, and then you walked for about a mile. You got to see the bears, which now we're going to have a look at.
Yeah, and it was a sort of a platform, and we were escorted by a couple of men with guns, and and so away they were. Most of the bears, when we first got there, were the black bears, and something was said about the brown bears, and I said to one of the men, what time do the brown bears come? There's a lot of this sort of time. And he said, oh, about 5 o'clock. And we said, oh, what? But sure enough, at 5 o'clock, the black bears kind of disappeared and the brown bears came, which was interesting.
The significance of these pictures is that water you saw, the salmon were swimming up there, and the bears were catching, and you'll see leftovers. And that previous picture, the bears would leave their leftovers on the rock, and these fellows would fly down and tidy up. So it was a real team effort, I suppose.
You could get, well, I suppose I had some sort of a telescopic lens, but you could get quite close, within reason. The claws. Ooh. And so now, remembering this was 2013, and I said to one of the men escorting us, do you think the weather has changed? And he said it certainly has, because they used to take trips up the wild rivers. And he said we can't do it anymore because it's so unpredictable when the snow is going to be melting and the flow in the rivers. And I thought that was an interesting comment, 13 years ago. That's the photo of the bald eagle. We were there for 3 hours, so there's lots of photos. And that's just further downstream from where we were. And now that's a juvenile eagle. And then came the brown bears. I love that photo. The little cubs coming along.
That one?
No, the one before, yeah. Now, Mike, you'll tell them about the toilet.
That's the toilet.
Yeah.
That's the toilet. If you pay close attention, notice the hinges on the outside and the door opens outwards. That is because at one stage in the history of the place, the door opened inwards, but one of the bears got in there, couldn't get out again. A cub, that's right. So it caused all sorts of havoc anyway, so clearly they thought we'll put the hinge on the other side so that they can't get trapped in there anymore. And there was also a hole in the door so you could see whether there was anyone in there. That's that photo.
This is Petersburg.
Yeah, okay.
Oh. So another trip out of Wrangell was to this place called Petersburg, and we can just on a boat, quite a few pictures of the icebergs. We thought that the young fellow driving the boat went off during the day. We reckon he visited his girlfriend.
We had plenty of time to get a feed.
Yeah. And a glacier going down to the ocean.
Enjoyed that.
When you get up close to the glaciers, you can actually hear little cracks. The breaking move.
Okay, so that's the town.
Which is where the guy went to visit his girlfriend. That's right.
Okay, so after Wrangell, we got back onto another boat just for the day, and we headed up to Juneau. And I was desperate to get a photo of the sunset, but it took so long. You know how here you can go out and wait a few minutes, and I was waiting for ages. Now, when we got to Juneau, the place that somehow or other Sandy Rollins found out that it was close to our 30th wedding anniversary, and she said, I can book. This was at Grandma's Feathers Bed, this place was called, and she booked the honeymoon suite for us. Yeah. So we're only in Juneau for the day. Let's press on. And Juneau's the only capital in the world that you can only get to either by flying or by water, by ocean. They're just some touring around a nice church with a lot of timber. Okay, so now it gets a bit confusing here, but we've got the car by this, and these are the musk ox, which apparently were wild and almost extinct until someone decided to domesticate them. And on the table there's a book of Arctic knitting, which I bought, and their fibre is extremely fine. I bought the book. I've never actually knitted anything. It looks pretty difficult to me, but that was just an interesting stop. And then some more water. Now we got to Talkeetna. Okay, do you want to talk about this?
Yes. Yeah, just hold for a little while, Trish. We got to Talkeetna, and that's where the Mount McKinley is, which is the highest peak in the northern hemisphere. And as we're driving in, it was just lit up with sunshine, which you think, yeah, that's pretty good. But then we discovered it doesn't happen that often. It's not that often you can see the top of the mountain. So we were extremely lucky. And we booked.
Mike said, right, we're going in a plane.
Yeah, that's right. We booked into our accommodation and then went straight to a place that organised a flight up around Mount McKinley. And these next few scenes are from the aeroplane. That's where Glacier had been, worked its way down. And part of the deal was you landed there and got out of the airplane on the mountain, which clearly we have done. And they're the shorts that I bought when we first arrived. And I've still got that jumper.
And guess who fell over in the snow?
I did a snow star.
That's the pilot.
Oh yes, that's the pilot. So we said to him, well, what do you do in the winter when you can't take people up here? He said, oh, I go to Hawaii and take people on flights there. What a horrible life.
They take people up onto the mountains and skiers, and they leave them there and they ski down. Now, we get a bit confused here. Not sure. Oh, I think this was out of Talkeetna. It was a, press on, Trish. Now this was an old gold mining village, because there would have been gold mining that is now abandoned.
It's a bit like a variation of Sovereign Hill, or a history mock-up type thing, really.
Now, I can't remember what they call those areas where the glaciers have been. Okay, so that was the vehicle we had, which was a good car, yeah. And we need to tell you that when we picked up the car, we asked what about a map? But every year they produce this quite a sizable book called the Milepost, and it has every piece of information every mile. So you're heading in that direction, and it will say, oh well, this cafe is closed for renovations until so and so, and there's loose curbing on the side of the road at here, and so you could follow it by mile, and you also got just a regular map, because I suppose then there's not probably the little roads in Alaska like we have here, and the roads were very good, and parts of the road, because they'd only have a certain amount of time to fix the roads, and if you came across some roadworks, you had to stop, and a vehicle would escort, a pilot car would escort you through the roadworks. Yeah, we struck that a couple of times. Now that tree is where a beaver's been at work. You can see where he's gnawed away. And so we went on a boat up a river, and they took us up to, this is category 5. You know how people do that white water rafting. Well, this is the category 5 white water rafting.
Ronda loves being on boats.
Remember that one of the fellows escorting the trip on the boat told us they'd been walking in the woods, and he'd sat down and laid up against the trunk of a tree and fell asleep, and when he woke up, this baby bear was looking at him, and he thought, where's the mother? So they sort of stopped the boat and revved it so we could see the rapids. apparently the most dangerous animal over there is the moose. But they're pretty stupid because apparently if you come across a moose, you can hide behind a tree, and because it can't see you, well, it forgets you're there. So that was a little trick we were told, although we didn't see many. What's the plural of moose?
Mice.
Yes.
Plural of moose.
So these are just photos during the travels. That's a moose. We went on a trip into the Denali National Park. That was an escorted trip for the day. And the Americans get really excited seeing an animal or a bird. We didn't see many birds at all. And we remarked that in Australia, I mean, we see lots of birds and a fair few, you know, go to Hall's Gap and you can see all the kangaroos. But they would rush to the side of the bus if something was spotted and take numerous photos. And yeah, it was interesting.
There was one stage they said, oh, there's a moose, and they all rushed to one side of the bus, and I'm sitting there looking, I was fucking if I could see anything, but I really couldn't see it. Even with, I got the binoculars, and it looked like a speck in the distance. And I went, hey, this is great. I said, it's a speck.
And this is Fairbanks, which is a fair-sized town, interesting place. And now this had been pre-arranged, a trip up to the Arctic Circle, and we had to be at this place at 5 o'clock in the morning, and that's the bus, and up the Dalton Highway. And so, do you want to talk about the oil? Bearing in mind there's permafrost all over in Alaska.
That pipe you can see is carrying oil. It's mined right up the very, very, very top. And to bring it down by truck was just considered unsatisfactory. Also, you could not do it year round because there's no access by road all year round. So this was this huge pipeline. You'll notice that underneath the pipe where it's sitting, those are actually springs it's sitting on. Because of the coldness and the movement, it allows for the pipe to actually move back and forth as a result of whatever the weather happens to be. So that was quite a feat of engineering because it goes for thousands of miles. That's the Yukon River, and that's a boat on the side of the Yukon River.
The Sheldon Beach?
I don't know. That's the Arctic Circle. There's a question I can answer, Trish. Yes, we did, yes. I love that. I love that name. It's the name of a road. There's that pipeline again.
So we went up to the Arctic Circle on that bus and we flew back. Some people, I think, actually stayed. That was at Coldfoot, was the name of the place.
Yes. Yep.
And then this is travelling on. Just different places that you stop at on the way. Now, there's, if you go back to that picture of the one with the flowers, no, keep, press on. Now, wrong way, Trish.
Go back again?
Okay, stop there. Now those flowers, somewhere they told us that when the flowers start flowering, it's 6 weeks until the snow starts. I suppose it's one of those things that we have here in Australia, you know, if the wind's coming from the east, it'll rain and all that sort of thing. Yeah. And you're still going the wrong way, Trish.
I'm going forwards now.
All right.
What's that?
A bath.
Oh, okay.
Now we got to the place at the Black Rapids, and we got there reasonably early, and so the person at the place said, "Do you want to go for a walk?" And we said, "Oh, okay." And she said, "Rowdy, that's the dog, Rowdy will take you." So off we went, and he took us on a, well, I don't know, was it about a couple of kilometres? And he,
took us through scrub, so he'd disappear, and you'd go around a bend, and there was Rowdy waiting, sort of say, "Well, come on then, come on."
and so this is the place where we were staying at. Now there actually happened to be a wedding happening there that day, but we had the honeymoon suite. And the next day, the bridegroom said to us, "Oh, you had the honeymoon suite, did you?" It's quite a
We left shortly after.
quite a spectacular place.
I know they came to windows way up there.
And it's sort of in the middle of nowhere, really, yeah. And I think our room was the one right up the top, the honeymoon suite. And these are the views from that room. And we had to have a sunset, which of course was like about 10:30 at night. It's just mountains everywhere. Okay, now this is moving on, and this is called the Matanushka Glacier. And as Trish moves on, we'll see how you could get quite close to it. You could actually walk onto it, which we didn't do. I don't think our travel insurance would have covered it if you'd fallen into something. And that's all the sort of stuff left behind after it's moved on. And this was a school. Of course, nothing was happening because it was in the middle of July.
The place you get what an original name.
Now these are the little cabins we stayed at. Sheep Mountain Lodge, that was called. We went to a couple of markets on the way too, and one of them, because they obviously produce a lot of food, and one of the places had the biggest rhubarb I've ever seen. It was huge. This was a place where obviously you could feed the deer, the caribou.
So which one's Rudolph?
Now this was a moose that apparently had been, I think that had been found as a young moose, and they have it there for the tourists, I guess. And guess what? You could feed it. And so Mike decided he would.
You could kiss it.
Kiss it, but go back to that one.
Kissing meant peel a banana, put half of it in your mouth, go up to the moose and then cook the banana. Touristy, yeah, I know. But
I hope they let it out of there at various times. Okay, so this is back at Anchorage, which is the main, well, I suppose it's, I don't know if it's the capital, the main
Juneau's
place.
the capital.
Oh, that's
Juneau's the
right,
capital.
yeah.
So were they putting on a play?
Yes, that, yeah, and then you could have a sort of like a sled ride around this place. And then more travels, and then we sort of went south, and so this is where a lot of the motorhomes and so on pull up. I don't know that I would find it very attractive, but yeah. Now, at Seward, which is Seward, they had this sort of like an aquarium, and they had a very sophisticated way of drawing the water from the actual ocean, and that then heated the water in the aquarium. And though, just go back a bit, Trish, those that's a puffin, and you could see it dove down into the water and was down for ages.
They had a deep pool, and you could stand obviously on the outside at the bottom of the pool, and it would have been easily the depth of this ceiling. And the puffin, you could watch the puffin dive down. And it's incredible how that little fella could just stay down there and do whatever it needed to do for a quarter or well over a minute before it just went back up again. It was fabulous to watch.
And then out of there we did a boat trip. Sandy booked us into this place called the Falls. I think we were the only ones there, and yeah, and well, that's why it was called the Falls. That's at the back. Now this is where we left to go on this boat trip, and we were promised that we would see some whales. Some friends of ours did that trip some other time and didn't see a one, but we saw some orcas, which was interesting. And of course they went out and as you'll see, we saw glaciers. There's something different about glaciers that go into the ocean, and I can't remember what it was. This is where, as Mike said before, you could actually hear it cracking.
Yeah, that gives you an idea of the size of those things, because those boats are tiny.
Okay, now we went down to Homer. That section going out into the bay is the Homer Spit, and you could actually drive out there. That was one place, you know how when you're travelling around and you're eating out all the time, but the place where we stayed, there was actually a stove, and we cooked our meal and we had mashed potatoes. Because you know, something a bit, I just want some mashed potatoes. We had something else with it. And now this is where we met up with Sandy, and we realised that she had missed a day, because the itinerary, it was like a checkbook, and you had all these kind of vouchers. So when you got to a place, you gave them the voucher. It was a very good system. And so we realised that we were supposed to be back at Anchorage. You said she's missed a day. So we actually caught up with her, and so on the way back to Anchorage, this place is called Girdwood, and she booked accommodation and a little trip from Girdwood, which you'll see. So it was I don't think they do it anymore, but it was a brilliant system. Okay, so we went to this.
Just before you go on, at Girdwood, shortly after we were there, we read in the paper that a fellow had been walking and come across a bear. Now, the fellow who was walking happened to have an AK-47, so he killed the bear. Nice.
To walk around.
Just happened to be walking around with an AK-47. Crazy people. It's Americans and guns.
Okay, so this was, we had to get dressed up, as you can see, and into that little helicopter up into the mountains. Now, every year, you might have heard, they have this race called the Iditarod. And actually, at the biggest morning tea, there was a woman there, and she had a T-shirt that said Iditarod, and it's a race with the huskies, or with the sled dogs, the dogs. And so in the summer, they've got this camp where they have the dogs and they train them. And so I think they said the trainers would go up for probably about 12 days and stay up there with the dogs and train. And they weren't pure huskies, they were mixed breed dogs. Okay, so now that man's, I think he's, so they hooked up a team for us.
Just go back one if you would mind, Trish. Yeah, it's, I'm pretty sure it's that dog lined out.
Aye.
It's just, I'm not doing anything until you tell me to. It was a real layback butt. I fell in love with it. It's really had to be invited. Didn't do anything.
And I think that's him. I can't quite remember what his name was. And they all had certain jobs, like the ones in the front were the ones who did the turning and so on, and then the ones kind of in the middle were sort of like the muscle, and yeah, they all had specific jobs. So we sort of went on a bit of a circuit, and this looks like we were driving, but we weren't. It was a lot of fun. And to think that we weren't going to do this and it happened at the very last minute, it was pretty special. And then they had puppies.
Everybody loves a puppy.
And so back into the helicopter, and
I never got to ride in the front of the helicopter.
okay, now we'll stop there. So we went back to Anchorage, and we had a flight down to Vancouver. And so this is Vancouver. And this is right on the bay. These places were sort of built onto the water.
This was part of a day trip, and these people volunteered to lead them, and you met at a certain point, and they would take you around, and at the end of the tour type thing, you could decide how much money you would give them or not give them. And there was one English couple.
Be careful.
Well, yeah, but it was really incredible. They bickered over whether they'd give him $2 or $4 or something. And this was how this bloke made it, and he was really, really, really good. He knew his stuff, and because a lot of those little houses you saw there were artists.
Yeah,
Like that one there, the Opus Frame and Supply. But it was just an interesting sort of concept of how much bigger value is.
Yeah, so this was, they said go to this Grantham Island where it used to be an industrial area, but it has been set up for artists and so on. And one of the places we went to, a woman was weaving with silk, and you'll have a, at the end you can have a look. I bought one of her scarves. That was an interesting place. Yeah, very pretty.
Yeah, that's really good.
Oh, and part of the, we also went to this Sun Yat-sen garden, Chinese garden, which was interesting. So now from Vancouver, we got on the Via Rail that went from Vancouver to Toronto for 4 days. We were on the train, and you went down. You sort of got on late-ish in the day. You were only allowed to. Oh, now you better slow down, Trish. You only you had limited. We only had to take one case. The other one went in the baggage carriage, and we had our own cabin that had a toilet and wash basin. You had to go sort of down the passage for a shower, and then there were other sections where there were sort of like bunk beds, and all meals and so on were provided. We were towards the back of the train, which worked out to be really quite good. And they made very nice gin and tonics, I must admit.
We were in the second last carriage. The last carriage was the one that had the observation deck above the top of it, and it also had the bar. So we were in a good posse, and as Ronda said, they made great gin and tonics. Yeah.
And there's an American couple before lunch would sit up and have 2 Bloody Marys each, just to get things going.
Yeah, well before lunch.
So these are just scenes of as the train's going along. And so our train had to stop for the goods trains, which was interesting, watching them go by. And at one stage we actually were able to get off, and that's it was a big train, big long train, and you can see the observation sort of pod at the top. Okay, so we went to Toronto and we had a Greyhound bus to Niagara Falls, which was an experience in itself. And so apparently the Canadian side is more exciting than the American side of Niagara Falls. So we've got a few photos there. We weren't overly impressed with the town of Niagara Falls, were we? There were some horrible eating places. And Mike wanted to go to Hooters.
I wasn't allowed to.
You might have given Ronda a job.
No.
So you could go onto the water, but of course you had to get togged up in all those plastic things. Now that bridge, that big bridge, is the Rainbow Bridge that goes across into the United States. And if you watch those, what do they call it, border crossing things on the TV, they often refer to the Rainbow Bridge that goes across to Buffalo. And that's down into the waterfall. What lake does it go into? Lake Erie, yeah.
One of the great lakes, yeah.
Mike said you wouldn't want to fall in, would you? Okay, so then we went across to Buffalo and took a plane. We went first class, didn't we, Mike? Because we got to the airport and the woman said, you have to pay for your baggage. So if you want to go first class, which was about the same as it would have cost for the baggage, you don't have to pay for the baggage. So we flew first class, which really wasn't very exciting.
Slightly bigger seat.
Okay, so we flew down to Washington, DC,
Oh,
and
is that the reflecting pool?
That's the reflective pool. Yes.
now,
They find the crack.
Yeah, it lives in the White House.
Did Trump drive his motor car through the pool? Recently, didn't Trump drive the motorcade in Germany or something through?
Oh, he's blaming somebody for it.
I know he's blaming somebody for it, but that's,
it got algae. Yeah.
yeah.
We went to Washington in 2011 and we stayed at this quite nice hotel, but we said to Chris Bewalder, look, we could have something a little bit more upmarket. So he booked us, just hold on Trish, he booked us into the Fairmont, which was very nice. And of course,
Yes, it was a hot day when we arrived, and being Australians, t-shirt, shorts, in we go, g'day. It's very proper place. It's
But they were-
up for a room.
they were very welcoming. Yes, now this is, well, you've heard of a number of museums in Washington, the Smithsonian, and this is one of them, which are all free. So these are just some photos taken at the Smithsonian. One of those butterfly houses like they have at the Melbourne Zoo. I think that's supposed to be a comparison between me and the elephant's leg. Now, I'm not sure what that is. And Mike, you can finish us off.
Many moons ago, before I became an Australian, while we still lived in the United States, my parents took me to Washington DC, and my mother took me to the Smithsonian Institute, where I saw the skeleton of the Diplodocus. And for quite a long time after that, I was so proud. I must have been about 7 or 8. I was so proud that I could say Diplodocus, but I didn't stop saying it until I was told to stop saying it. But I got home and, here we are at the baseball. I'll just pop back. We decided to go with baseball, and when we were being shown to our seats, we got seats behind home plate, and we were being shown down, and the guy picked us as Australians, and he showed us to our seats, and then he walked back, and he got about as far as the door, and he said, Aussie, Aussie, Aussie. And we, oi, oi, oi. And I have to say, look, the Americans are very friendly people. Very friendly indeed.
Actually, that was, before we went in, this person, because we were all lined up, it was the Washington Nationals, and who were they playing? I can't remember. And this fellow said, if you do this, you're out. If you do that, you're out. If you do that, you're out.
Yeah, it was over the loudspeaker. It was talking about behaviour. And there was a young lad stepped in front of me or something at one stage. He said, oh, excuse me, sir. It was just, the insistence on good behaviour. And dare I say, we don't compare it to the president, who's the antithesis of good behaviour. But over there, the politeness and the adherence to tradition and formalities. We also, on another trip, attended the baseball at Yankee Stadium, and at one stage. I was coming back from the toilet,
That
and
was the 7th innings when
the
the...
7th inning stretch, and they were playing one of the patriotic songs, and I didn't realise I still had the cap on, and got tapped on the shoulder. Cap off, please, sir. So it's sort of an interesting contradiction between the way we experience the Americans in their homeland and the day-to-day Americans, and what we've been hearing lately. Anyway, I'll get off that hobby horse.
These are just scenes around Washington. The place we stayed at was in Georgetown, which was interesting, and that's around near where we were staying. There's always scaffolding somewhere, isn't there?
This is Arlington Cemetery. That's tomb of the unknown soldier. Just stop for a minute with this one, Trish. Now this is pretty dear to my heart in many respects. My father was a US Marine, and this is the statue of the Marines raising the flag on Iwo Jima during the Pacific Campaign. My uncle, Keith, died in that battle. And it's every Marine Corps base has that statue. And I think Johnny Cash sings a song about an American Indian who was part of that of the armed services who were on that battle. So that was pretty special for this job. Thanks, Trish.
After we'd been there, it was quite hot and humid, and we walked to a subway, and we went up to this rather large African American fellow to get directions, and he said, "Stop." He said, "Deep breaths," because he could see we were really hot. Breathe in. And after he thought we were okay, he gave us the directions.
This is the Capitol building, which became famous on January the 6th a few years back. This is inside the Capitol building.
That's the end.
That's the end.
Yep.
Okay, and that, folks, was our trip to Alaska and briefly Vancouver and Washington, D.C. So I guess now you have a cup of tea or whatever it is that you want to do, and feel free to have a look at the little bits and bobs we have up here. So thank you.
That's the park at Lace Hook. Someone who's very clever could probably do some of that.
Are there any questions that you?
That was the scarf I was telling you about, this weaving silk. And just some little, as I said, these things were actually properly made in Alaska.
Ronda, yes. Did you go back again?
not until the next presidential election. I'm serious. They go through this stuff. And I also was one of the things on the dual citizenship. Some of the stuff that
My cousin lives in the States and she's got dual citizenship. So it is another one.
we don't know which way. She said that it was yes. I turned 13 just now. Mum was a he was a Marine, so I was born in North Carolina, lived in North Carolina, South Carolina, Virginia, Ohio. Because he just, in the services, John would just come home and say, oh, I'm going to be so-and-so.
So you were going to change the rules to This is what called my love husband. Anyone got any more questions about
They say back in the times, West Washington University, Seattle, they're down San Francisco, across the Grand Canyon.
Go back. Did you know from the man said when we got back, this century did 6,000 miles in my car.
Yellowstone, we were there the first weekend, so it snowed every night. I sort of walked there and get up there. Shorts and t-shirt. It's interesting walking outside. I really didn't realise it was a fire door today. So I had to go down the outside stairs and go back into the lobby, shorts and t-shirt.
He was Australian, she was on some sort of golf scholarship.
The Grand Canyon of the Yellowstone. Yosemite's right. day to in the first 15 minutes I could find somewhere.
It's all right.
It's beautiful, but it's got a
You
silk.
go, Ronda. You go.
You know, it's the one that always has to sit at the front of the bus and so on. There's more than the tour load does. Something like that.
Actually, one of them went to the Denali, they said quite clearly, we stopped for morning tea and they had cookies. And they said, if you're going to have a cookie, you eat it in the bus. Because if you go outside, you're eating, and even if you drop some crumbs, the bears will come. And this silly woman is out there, and she's eating away. You sort of, she got married about you sort of think, listen and understand, because they used to have trouble with the bears.
In Melbourne, you know, they used to play school holiday. I used to play tennis at school holiday, the
Catching
They
cars.
They have those special bins, I suppose.
School friends, and I say, application, they've got one game. And then they played in the night.
And what do they do? They run up with birds flying around with buns and eyes and all sorts of things. I saw an elderly couple, I was on a bench, all the seats were taken. Once, and then there's white couple, two couples sat there, sorry, or quite close to him, and he wanted, so he put a toy in, and he got his phone out to take a photo, and in that time, that bird picked up the pie and chased it because the pie also and picked it up and he put it in the rubbish bin. And next minute, there's another bird sitting on the umbrella thing, there's a roll, red roll. Oh, and I think sometimes kids think, I just know that, you know, there's that many young birds that still food in that place, I tell you.
There was a scene, I think it was.
I know the girl, I think Jeannie said to me, she married Frank Sidgwick in tennis. She used to play golf too, and we had school reunions.
I think the ones that they were, yes, yeah, they probably were, yeah.
When we used to play golf, you know, old collegians golf, Jean Sedgman was really happy to go down and play.
That was marvellous, we were there in 1998. Mike doesn't like watching it all play.
There was this There's mailbox at 2 seconds up on the outside of the building. My language wasn't good.
He had to face the other way on his way down.
I feel
There was one place we stopped at too where they had this ice, something was the ice, and you have to guess as to when it's totally melted. Something there for a competition.
yeah, that's right.
We didn't win.
No, that was memorable.
Yes, it's an international effort. And they apparently really like winter because they ski and they become frozen.
Yes, back down in the cool. That's right.
You were saying there was hot winds there, in cold, different sort of cold.
So before I came out here, I lived in for a while, it's later. And in winter, the river froze over.
They go to the farm?
Snow, sort of thing. We could ice skate on the river if there was no wind. It just And as soon as there was a breath of wind, if you're familiar with Charlie Brown, the Peanuts thing, that's how it was.
I think when we went up to the Armchair circle, because we bought those, that big coat, and we hardly looked. It was now, it was July, there's only a sort of a certain period when you can go, I think by September, that's it. Well, it's this town of Coldfoot, it was just a, like an outpost sort of thing. We did stop on that trip, they stopped at a homestead, there's a big little living off the grid, I suppose. Their toilet down the back, but they liked it.
He was working his way around this Friday and clean up the East Coast. That's where he's from. He got his
The trouble is, you know, trains young, young guys, these 60s, and then other companies pinch, you know.
Yes.
Well,